Welcome to Soltron. This is the video review for Miniforce Super Dino Power 2, or Miniforce Part 2, I guess. Super Tyraking. And here's how all the Miniforce figures I just got. This is what they all look like together. And here's how they look versus Tobot and Transformers. And why not? Here they are with Power Rangers Magiking, or the Mystic Force Power Rangers figures, and I'll show you how they look with the combined forms too. And here they are with the combined Magiking. This custom's looking pretty good. I kind of forgot about it. I really need to get this guy finished. Okay, so my number one gripe with this set is these guys all combine into a giant T-Rex, which is a great idea, but it would have also been great, even way better, if they all combined into a giant robot like the Magiking set. So that's kind of a letdown that they only combine into a T-Rex and not a giant robot. But let's start with Pink here. So no articulation in the neck. She's got like full 360 on the elbows, great up and down outward motion on the shoulder with a ratchet, and then kind of this weird bicep kind of thing, and curling iron hands, which also have little ratchets. And then these hands do open, which is a nice touch. So pretty good arm articulation. There's even a bicep swivel, but you're gonna end up with curling iron arms, because just the way the elbow's facing just doesn't really work, which is kind of typical for these kinds of figures. So nothing in the waist. You get good pivot on the thigh here and a good outward kick. No forward kick at all. No, I take that back. You do get a knee, a ratcheted knee, and you do get foot pivot. So not too bad in the articulation department, but you're not going to get any really good poses out of this figure, especially because the head doesn't turn. But you can kind of almost get some poses going. So pretty interesting looking figure. It looks kind of like a bear to me. It's really chunky and weird looking and Voyager sized. So I'd rank this figure as like number 4 out of the 5. So 4th place. And then in 5th place for aesthetics, you get this guy, which looks kind of terrible. Let's compare him to the instructions. Okay, here's how he looks in the instructions. Decent proportions, little chunky. Here's how he looks in real life, just very stumpy, just doesn't work at all. And I also want to point out the instructions are in Chinese, so this is a Chinese release of this figure. The quality is great on these figures, definitely a 10 out of 10. So these are not a knockoff at all. I'm guessing they're officially licensed by the company Jump Go. So as I said, this figure is kind of terrible. No head articulation at all. You're going to get elbow articulation on very strong ratchets. You can get some upward, kind of outward motion. I don't know how that's going to help you pose. And then you do get, thankfully, rotating shoulders, so that can be pretty useful. And then you also get biceps, oddly enough, which is usually the articulation you miss out on these kinds of figures. And then you also do get a waist swivel for transformation, and then you do get forward and backward kick, this much, on very strong ratchets. And then you're not going to get any knee or foot articulation at all. This is all just basically one solid piece. So pretty big missed opportunity. They should have had the legs extend. Maybe the torso could extend. At least if the legs were longer or folded down, it would really help his proportions and put him in proportion with the rest of the team. But moving on to who I'd consider the 3rd place figure. So we have this dark blue robot, and he's got pretty excellent head sculpt. All the head sculpts on these figures are pretty good, minus this guy. He's just kind of terrible. But the head sculpts are really interesting to look at. So this kind of reminds me of a baseball player. And this one reminds me of just kind of generic robot. So the articulation for this guy is also pretty bad by Miniforce standards, so no shoulder swivel at all. You're going to get a little bit of forward motion on the, I guess you would call that an elbow, or maybe you'd call that the shoulder, is this moving hinge here, but there's no elbow at all. So this figure they really messed up. Should have had a telescoping joint right here and give him a full elbow. Would have helped out a lot. But no bicep swivel, of course. You're not going to get anything for these wrists either. And then you do get great outward kick, and then a good forward kick, good backward kick, and then the knee is in a weird place. It's kind of, it looks like it's in the middle of the shin, but it does work as a knee. That's the only purpose of this joint, so that is technically his knee joint. And then you do get a toe pivot too. So decent articulation, pretty good looking proportions. If the arms were longer, the proportions would be spot on. And then we get the number 2, in my opinion, is the light blue robot, which I think is the leader because he forms the head. So this robot has 360 on the shoulder, outward motion on the shoulder, no elbow joint at all, but you do get bicep swivel, or really forearm swivel, and because of the transformation you get this little joint that folds in the fist. So some missing joints on the forearm is definitely elbow, nothing there. No waist articulation. You do get a little bit of head articulation, and the head sculpt on this guy is also very amazing. Definitely very 80s robot, looks pretty incredible, kind of very ninja-esque. And then you do get good forward kick, and then an outward kick, and these skirts move out of the way, which is very nice, and then a backward kick. And then the knee on this guy is also weird. It's kind of in here instead of down in this area. So you kind of can fake a knee joint, and then there would be like a second joint here to kind of sort of give you a knee, but it doesn't fold very much. So the knee is just going to kind of destroy the sculpt. It doesn't really work. And then no thigh swivel, and the feet don't have a pivot or anything there either. So definitely missing some standard articulation. And then finally we have Red, which has kind of a dragon looking head sculpt. And this one's my favorite. He has the best proportions in my opinion, so number 1 out of 5. So 360 on the shoulder, nice strong ratchets, no outward motion on the shoulder though. He does have bicep swivel and elbows, but curling arms, again, curling iron arms. So fist will always be facing up when you bend the elbow. And then he does have a little bit of outward motion on the kick, so side kick, and then an okay, like 45 degrees on the forward kick, and then about more than 45 on the backward kick. And then he does have one click on the knee, which amounts to pretty much nothing. It's not very useful. And then no toe pivot. And then he does have waist swivel, which is pretty useful. And no head articulation for no apparent reason. So we're missing a lot of articulation on all these figures, even by Miniforce standards. They're just missing lots of joints. Every figure is missing some kind of joint that it really needs. So that cuts into how fun these figures are. The quality for all of them is definitely a 10. They all feel rock solid, perfect plastic, great ratchets. Everything feels really good in hand. As for the aesthetics, it's a pretty mixed bag. I really like how the Red robot looks, but I really dislike this guy who's kind of just the leftover parts. The light blue robot also really excellent looking, and the dark blue robot pretty cool looking too. So those three make a really great looking team. And then you get these two kind of leftovers, which bring it down the whole aesthetic. But overall, I would say the robot modes are probably a good 7. And then these two robots especially Well, actually, these three in the back all remind me of like 80s anime super robots. Okay, so real fast on the transformation. So red is going to make up the tail, so these yellow bits just fold up, and that's going to be his connection point. And then the legs just clip together, and then his toes just pivot up. And then you want to, according to the directions, you just move the arms and fold them back behind his back, and then you're going to rotate the tail so that the red section is facing up, and this will be the underside of the tail. And then the head is just going to hide away back here. So that's already ready for combination, and that's the tail. So moving forward to get ready, yellow here is going to be basically the pelvis of this dinosaur. So you're going to shove both the shoulders forward, and then you're going to rotate them up, and they're going to, you can probably tell they clip together. And then you're going to face the two fists or forearm sections together, and this is where red is going to attach. And then you fold out these sections, so you can fold both the biceps down. And then we don't really have to do anything with these sections right now, but there's also connection points that are hard to see on the bottom of the feet. And then these will become the T-Rex arms. So maybe this is kind of the chest section in a way. So you're just going to use, this is going to go in yellow's fists, and then this peg is just going to peg into the inside of the forearms. So you just open these up a little bit, peg it, and then close it back up. And there you go. So this is already sort of shaping up to be a T-Rex, and then you need to rotate this so that the T-Rex arms are facing front. So now we'll work in the hip section and the waist. Okay, so that's this robot. He becomes the pelvis. So you're going to collapse the fake knees, rotate the toes up and out of the way, and then his entire abdomen is also going to collapse in. And then he's got this weird kind of butterfly joint that needs to be opened up on both shoulders. Oh, and I forgot to mention he's got outward motion on the shoulders too. And then he's got these combiner ports on the back of his forearms. So you're going to get those out of the way, and then fold his fists in out of the way. Okay, and the next thing you're going to do is you're going to fold his forearms up into his shoulders, and then extend these combiner ports. And then finally, his shins are going to basically clip in to this section here, which makes the hips of the T-Rex. Okay, so here's the pelvis of the T-Rex, and then his two combiner ports on his back are going to connect to the feet of yellow, and then basically yellow just rotates him up into place, and that's, now you've got the chest, hips, and tail of a T-Rex. And then one huge flaw with this figure is that this whole pelvis section it's held in place by these really strong ratchets on yellow, and it's also held in place by these very tiny clips on yellow that keep it in the right position, which are just not strong enough to really hold this whole chunk of plastic, especially when the feet are engaged. So this could just really peg in better, but there's a pretty big design flaw that nothing else secures this whole section of the T-Rex body. So now we'll go down to the feet. So we'll take this guy, and like Magic King, the mermaid, you're going to rip him in half. And then you've got these little clip sections need to be folded out of the way so the foot will be completely flat and flush. And then this next section is going to fold into the torso. And then you take the forearm, and the fist is going to fold all the way back into the forearm. There's no cover for that or anything. And then you can see this is going to be the toes of the T-Rex form. And these toes, there's a tiny clip here that corresponds to an opening there. So you just rotate that down into place, and then finally the whole leg here is just going to fold up, and you've got basically one T-Rex foot, and here's the combiner port in the bottom of the foot. Okay, so you have these two T-Rex feet. I think the yellow section is supposed to face out. So now we'll just take our huge T-Rex torso, and the thighs are just going to drop right into the feet here. And now you've got what looks like a decent T-Rex body. Alright, and then finally you have Blue, who becomes the head of the T-Rex. So you fold these little shoulder armor bits up, and then fold up the forearms into the shoulders, fold the fists up so they're out of the way, and then you're going to collapse the head, and then there's this panel that covers the head section, and then these hip skirts are going to fold all the way up, and then you have a teal colored combiner port right here, which is going to peg into yellow, the chest section, and then these toes just fold all the way back around, and these two head sections clip together. So now you have the top of the T-Rex head, and then you need to open the knee pads, and that will allow the knees to fold on those weird joints that you saw earlier, and that allows everything to basically collapse into place. So the T-Rex head can have a closed mouth, but the way that these clips are on the inside of the body, the mouth is actually going to remain open like this. And because it clips into place, this jaw just really doesn't work. Like this kind of folds down, but that looks really weird. So he can kind of open and close his mouth. That looks wrong. So if we clip the 2 feet together, the 2 legs, I like to not clip the legs into the skull section, and that way the T-Rex can close his mouth. But if you clip it in, he's always going to have his mouth partially open like this. So I like to have it not closed in, that way he can close his mouth all the way. And there you have pretty good looking T-Rex head with a clear plastic eyes, but it's so dark you can't really see it. Okay, so here's our T-Rex body. We're going to fold up his little forearms, and then this is the port where the head is going to peg in, so you have to put some force to get this plastic out of the way. And then this little clip helps secure this head, and then this just slots in right there, obviously. Okay, and then you just kind of have to hope and pray that that's going to stay on. It's not a super firm connection. It can kind of be easily knocked off. And then you have the completed T-Rex mode, which is gigantic. So here he is with a ruler. Here he is with a deluxe transformer. It's not even close. The deluxe is about the size of one of the feet. So he's pretty large. He's smaller than Triptychon, but a really large figure. And here he is with that Magic King custom from earlier. This dragon does not have anywhere near the mass of this gigantic several pound T-Rex. So this alt mode is really impressive. It has almost no articulation. You can articulate these fiddly little arms in the front. You can maybe get something going on this tail with the hips of the red robot. And that's about it for articulation. This guy is not meant to be posed. His legs do not function. He cannot walk forwards or backwards. These don't really pivot at all. So he's basically a giant brick. Very intimidating to look at. Fun transformation, but ultimately, to me, kind of a letdown. It's really fun to transform him forward and backwards, but the playability here is pretty lacking. Especially, you can't even really open and shut the T-Rex mouth. It's just not very fun, and it's so large that even for a kid, this might not be a great choice. And the stability is kind of weird in places because some of the clips that are used, like the tiny little clips for the toes, are not a great choice when you have so much weight down here. So overall, playability I would say is probably something of like a 5, even though transforming the robots and transforming them, combining them back into this form is a lot of fun. But otherwise, this guy kind of misses the point. But the price I got him for was really great on Sir Toys. I'll leave a link in the description.